Welcome to the African History Network show, right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. Well, we know a lot of people are excited because inauguration is just around the corner. This is the day people have been waiting for 4 years or a little longer, right? All right, so it's a lot going on. So on today's show, we're going to continue our discussion dealing with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We know Dr. King Day was Monday, January 18th. So we have another clip of Dr. King to share with you. But on Dr. King Day, now I told you all that you're going to have Republicans who put out messages about Dr. King and they praise Dr. King. We talk about this each year, right? Each year you have Republicans who spent the entire year trying to dismantle Dr. King's legacy. They're going to put out some little tired messages trying to praise Dr. King, okay, and trying to give themselves cover for when they go to the Dr. King Day celebration in their districts, or especially if they have to go to one amongst African Americans at a church or something like that. So there were 127 Republicans, and we've got the names and everything. Huffington Post has a big article about this. We posted this article from the Huffington Post. There were 127 Republicans who voted to overturn the election results. They're in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. 127 Republicans who voted to overturn the election results. They put out statements praising Dr. King. Okay, we're gonna deal with some of this. You all would have been better off just staying quiet. If you didn't say anything, no, I don't think any African American that has any sense would have called you out if you didn't say anything after what you just did, trying to overturn the votes of African Americans. All right, so you had that take place. Then Donald Trump issued his divisive 1776 Commission Report on slavery and civil rights, and it's a report that is designed to refute the 1619 Project from the New York Times and Nicole Hannah Jones. So he issued the report on what day was it? On Dr. King Day, right? So there were numerous articles about this, and he did this. So Joe Biden and Kamala Harris spent a good portion of the day volunteering, Dr. King Day volunteering. NBCnews.com has an article about this. On MLK Day, Biden volunteers. Trump issues divisive report on slavery and civil rights. Okay, Trump's 1776 Commission issued a report attacking identity politics that was quickly dismissed by historians. So this is and he spent a whole lot of time doing pardons, also doing pardons, and I'm not sure if he got any money for any of these pardons. We know, according to the New York Times, that it's some money flowing to attorneys who say they have a in to Donald Trump trying to get pardons. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, so you have this taking place also. The 1776 Commission Report. There's a big article from CNN.com that we'll share with you as well, dealing with that, and we'll probably talk about that some more in the coming days. Because so on Monday's show, on our Dr. King Day show, one of the things we talked about was the history of how the Civil War history was rewritten. Okay, and the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and the funding that went into putting together curriculums that promoted the Confederacy and the lost cause, and the textbooks that were written, the songs that the children were taught, etc. Right? Well, the 1776 Commission is something like that for adults. Okay, Uh, that's what that's what this is. All right, so we'll talk about that, and then we see there was a article from news1.com that deals with the NAACP to Trump's mouthpiece. MLK is a day of action. Your action, shut up. Republicans who incited the Capitol coup fail at rehabilitating their image with misguided MLK Day messages. Okay, it happens every year, but this year is even worse. This year is even worse. All right, and then there was also we see that the U.S. has passed another grim milestone: 400,000 coronavirus deaths. 400,000 coronavirus deaths in the final hours of the Trump administration. 400,000 coronavirus deaths. Okay, so we'll talk about that. And on our Monday, on our Dr. King Day show, there was a caller that called in who talked about who mentioned Dr. King on the Mike Douglas show. Okay, now Mike Douglas was a white male talk show host back in the 1970s. 70s I know of, maybe been 60s, but I know 70s because I remember seeing the Mike Douglas show when I was a kid. All right, in the 1970s. So I have an excerpt of that interview. We're going to share that with you as well. And Dr. King is, well, actually is the 60s, So this was 60, probably 68, 67, 68. So yeah, Mike Douglas was on in the 60s also. This is Dr. King talking about the Vietnam War and his opposition to the Vietnam War. We'll share that with you also. All right, so on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Sign up for the email newsletter there as well. If you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, and then also through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. Okay, so, being that we're here 6 days a week instead of 1 day a week, we were doing Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. for 4 years. And then October 12th, 2020, we started Monday through Friday. So being that we're here 6 days a week instead of 1 day a week, the donations definitely help out. Also, all of my DVD lectures and digital downloads are available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. So let's see. All right, we have a few minutes here before the break. Call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. So let's look at this article from NBC News, and then also CNN. On MLK Day, Biden volunteers. Trump issues divisive report on slavery and civil rights. Trump's 1776 commission issued a report attacking identity politics that was quickly dismissed by historians. Okay, and all the historians were white except for one, Dr. Carol Swan, who is, how should I put this politely? I think she's brain damaged. Okay. And there was an article from thegrio.com, and we're going to try to pull this up here quickly. There was an article from the Grio that let me see, which one was this. If we could pull this up here. Well, we'll see if we can find this one. There was one from the Grio where Dr. Carol Swan was, I think it was the Grio. Dr. Carol Swan was quoted, and it says something to the effect that she didn't think racism existed because she got a PhD and became, she was African American and became successful. Something idiotic like that. Okay, and I'll try to find that article here. But if we look at this from NBC News, so Donald Trump used one of his last days in the White House on Monday, January 18th, 2021, to fight the culture war, while President-elect Joe Biden observed Martin Luther King Jr. Day by volunteering to help feed the needy. With less than 48 hours to go before Wednesday's inauguration, Trump laid low in the heavily fortified Capitol, while the White House provided no details about how Trump was spending his final hours in office. Barred from Twitter, Trump issued a proclamation on the federal holiday, Dr. King Day, the federal holiday, earlier Monday, encouraging, quote, all Americans to recommit themselves to Dr. King's dream by engaging in acts of service to others, to their community, and our nation. Okay. Now imagine that you just tried to overthrow the government so you could stay in office. And you're talking about recommitting, you're encouraging Americans to recommit themselves to Dr. King's dream by engaging in acts of service to others, to their community, and to our nation. You tried to overthrow the nation. You tried to overthrow the government. But not only that, the dream Dr. King talked about, that's after you dismantle white supremacy. Because in the speech that everybody likes to talk about, but very few people understand, the speech that was originally called Normalcy Never Again, Normalcy Never Again, then it was called A Canceled Check, then it was called I Have a Dream, because that's not the original name of the speech, I Have a Dream. That's not the original name of the speech. Speech is not about a dream. Dr. King is talking about dismantling white supremacy. Okay? The dream, after Mahalia Jackson said, tell him about the dream, Martin, then he starts talking about the dream. That's after you dismantle white supremacy and racism. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. Stand by, one commercial break. How's everybody doing? All right, African American business owners, email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Customer service at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. How's everybody doing? All right. This time goes by quickly because this show's only an hour. All right, stand by, one commercial break. We'll be back in a minute here. I'm going to try to squeeze all these topics in. We may go a little past 1 hour, but not too much past. Stand by, one commercial break. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also. All right. Okay, everybody stand by. Let's see who we have here. We've got Matthew Akhenaten. The original name of the speech was not I Have a Dream. Original name of the speech was Normalcy Never Again. The speech was not about a dream. Okay, we got Leah. How you doing, Leah? Denise. All right, let's see here. Now, what do I need to get? Let me see if we can find Dr. Crystal Swan, Dr. Carol Swan. There was a, was that Black America Web? Stand by. Is this what? We'll be back in a couple minutes here. Stand by.
Now, to see how our debt-free program can work for you, call 800-872-5230.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation of Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. And we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. So right before the break, we were talking about the 1776 Commission. Donald Trump released the report from the 1776 Commission. It's a 45-page document, and it's really a refutation to the 1619 project from the New York Times and journalist Nicole Hannah-Jones, who spearheaded that project, right? There's been a number of articles written about this. There was a big one from New York Times. We'll probably deal with the one from the New York Times on tomorrow's show. NBC News has an article on MLK Day, Biden volunteers, Trump issues divisive report on slavery and civil rights. You have one from CNN. Trump administration issues racist school curriculum report on MLK Day. All right. I wonder why he released it on Dr. King Day. So Donald Trump put out a little tired, just like a lot of these Republicans. Some of them tried to object to certifying the Electoral College votes. Many of them were attacking votes in various states made by African Americans because we didn't vote for Donald Trump. If we had voted for Donald Trump, all these Republicans who were objecting, they would be very quiet. Okay. The fact that we repudiated this fascist and white supremacist, okay, Benedict Donald, the first Russian president of the United States, because many of these Republicans are so spineless and violated their oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic. Okay, now they wanted to participate in trying to overthrow the government. So barred from Twitter, Trump issued a proclamation on the federal holiday, Dr. King Day, early Monday, encouraging, quote, all Americans to recommit themselves to Dr. King's dream by engaging in acts of service to others, to their community, and to our nation, end quote. Now, later on Monday, the White House issued a 45-page document. A 45-page document dubbed the 1776 Report, the 1776 Report, which claimed that, quote, identity politics made it less likely that racial reconciliation and healing can be obtained by pursuing Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. Okay, made it less likely that racial reconciliation and healing can be obtained by pursuing Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. But see, once again, Donald Trump didn't even want to acknowledge systemic racism existed. He had to be pressed on it by Bob Woodward in those recorded conversations, but he doesn't notice Trump doesn't want to talk about systemic racism. He nominated an Attorney General, William Barr, who doesn't think systemic racism exists in policing. But if you go read Dr. King's speech that was renamed I Have a Dream, because that's not the original name of the speech. If you go read the speech, one of the things Dr. King talks about in the speech is police brutality. So I find it very interesting when you have people like Trump or any of these Republicans, in some cases Democrats, white Democrats, or whatever, regardless of political persuasion, okay, but political affiliation. I just find it interesting how people just want to jump to the dream and holding hands and living in peace, but don't want to deal with Dr. King talking about dismantling white supremacy and racism and holding America accountable for a promissory note they gave us 100 years prior with the Emancipation Proclamation that did not free the slaves, by the way. We've talked about that. And then when we take that promissory note to the bank to deposit it, to cash it in, is marked insufficient funds. Okay, so Dr. King was talking about holding America accountable for a promise that they made to us, holding America accountable so they live up to their word, live up to their promise. Now, incidentally, there was an article from CNN. Trump talked out of pardoning kids and Republican lawmakers. Trump talked out of pardoning kids and Republican lawmakers. This is from January 19th, 2021. Top figures associated with the groups that helped organize it, including Women for America First and Turning Point Action, the political action committee arm of Turning Point USA, that's the little group little Candace Owens used to be with, have also voiced private concern about legal repercussions. See, what's happening when you read this article, what's happening is now a lot of these Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives, maybe the Senate, a lot of them feared legal retribution from that little stunt they pulled January 6th. So they were running to Trump trying to get a pardon. It's read this from read this from CNN. This is hilarious. It's like, okay, so now what are they going to do? Because I'm telling you, there's going to be some of these people going to probably get kicked out of their elected positions, and some of them could very well face legal consequences. I hope they do. They deserve it. I hope they do. This is from CNN.com. I'm going to pull this up here. Trump talked out of pardoning kids and Republican lawmakers. Just very quickly here, Donald Trump received an unsettling warning on his final Saturday night in the White House. Huddled for a lengthy meeting with his legal advisors, Trump was warned the pardons he once hoped to bestow upon his family and even himself would place him in a legally perilous position, convey the appearance of guilt, and potentially make him more vulnerable to reprisals. So too was Trump warned that pardons for Republican lawmakers who had sought them for their role in the Capitol insurrection would anger the very Senate Republicans who would determine Donald Trump's fate in the upcoming impeachment trial. I knew that was going to happen. It's like, wait a second. If you give a pardon to these traitors in the House of Representatives, you know you got this impeachment trial over here. And all those senators, you put their lives in jeopardy. Those domestic terrorist thugs that you sent to the U.S. Capitol building, you put the lives in jeopardy of your jury, you dumbass. This is what he just did. Okay. So look at this. Look at this article here from CNN. I knew this was gonna happen. I told you before, the worst thing Donald Trump ever did was run for president. Okay. Okay. And then we see he's gonna pardon Steve Bannon. All right. Little scruffy 2 shirts. He's gonna pardon Steve Bannon. How does somebody know so many criminals and so many unsavory characters? That's what I want to know. Maybe it's because birds of a feather flock together. Maybe that's why it is. All right. Trump talked out of pardoning kids and Republican lawmakers. All right. Then so look at this here. So too was Trump warned pardons for Republican lawmakers who had sought them for their role in the Capitol insurrection. Hopefully you all can see this. Would anger the very Senate Republicans who will determine his fate in an upcoming impeachment trial. White House counsel Pat Cipollone and another attorney who represented Trump in his first impeachment trial, Eric Hirschman, offered the grave warnings as Trump, his daughter Ivanka, and her husband Jared Kushner, who owes Deutsche Bank about $285 million. They went to Jared. His daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner listened. Other lawyers joined by telephone. They all told Trump he should not pardon himself, his family, or any GOP lawmakers in a prospective manner unless he was prepared to list specific crimes, because he was going to give a blanket pardon. Okay. He was just going to give a blanket pardon. Okay. Pat Cipollone and former Attorney General William Barr both warned Trump earlier this month they did not believe he should pardon himself. Multiple sources familiar with the matter told CNN last week. Former Attorney General William Barr conveyed this position to Trump before resigning last month, sources say. Trump continued to bring the matter up in the ensuing days, even after officials believed the issue was resolved. But the sobering meeting on Sunday evening at the White House seemed to put the idea to rest. Okay, so we'll see. Read the rest of this article here. We don't have time to get through all of it. All right. Trump talked out of pardoning his kids and Republican lawmakers. Okay, that's from CNN. All right. So if we, I want to go back to this one here from NBC News. Okay, this is dealing with on MLK Day, Biden volunteers. And we can show you this one also here on the screen share. How's everybody doing? Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Let's pull this up here. Okay, on MLK Day, Biden volunteers, and Kamala Harris was volunteering also. Biden volunteers, Trump issues divisive report on slavery, civil rights. All right, let me see where we go right here. Where we go. Trump's 1776 commission issued a report attacking identity politics that was quickly dismissed. Okay, I think Senator Kamala Harris volunteered as well. All right, so the report seems to be a response to, so this is a 45-page report called the 1776 report, which claimed that identity politics makes it less likely that racial reconciliation and healing can be attained by pursuing Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. They don't know what the hell Dr. King's dream was. The report seems to be a response to the New York Times 1619 project, which traced the story of slavery through American history and became a lightning rod for Trump and conservatives who saw it as an attack on their view of American history. Well, see, the problem is that Americans are very ignorant of history. So a lot of the view that white Americans have of history is largely wrong. A lot of the view that white Americans have of history is largely wrong. And then we deal with what we talked about on yesterday's show, this whole lost cause and the curriculums that were created to make the South, the Confederacy, seem like the victims, and they were just fighting for states' rights. And once again, I got to take it back to the report from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Teaching Hard History, American Slavery. This is why I keep talking about this, because when you read this report, they did a survey of 1,000 12th graders, 1,000 seniors all across the country. When you read this report, it shows how little Americans know about history. African Americans are never going to get reparations while Americans are ignorant of history. The votes don't exist in the U.S. House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate. You don't have enough votes in the Senate to get a bill passed to study reparations. How the hell are you going to get one passed to pay reparations? There are not enough votes in the U.S. House of Representatives to pass H.R. 40. which is a bill to study reparations and the legacy of slavery and the damage, the impact that slavery has had on African Americans, slavery, Jim Crow segregation, the legacy of slavery, and to come up with solutions, remedies. There's not enough votes to get that passed to study reparations. How the hell are you going to get a bill passed to pay reparations? Is even less support in the Senate. The Senate is 95% white. And the one black Republican in the Senate, Tim Scott, Black Tea Party Republican from South Carolina, he already said he's not voting for reparations. If the black guy is not going to vote for reparations, how you going to get white Republicans to vote for it? Or how you going to get them not to block it with the unanimous consent rule? Like Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin blocked the Juneteenth bill from becoming a federal holiday and giving white people the day off from work with the unanimous consent rule. If you can't get a Juneteenth bill passed in the Senate to give white people the day off from work, how you going to get a reparations bill passed in the Senate to pay out reparations to African Americans and chattel slavery ended 156 years ago? See, nobody wants to ask these questions because most people don't even know the questions to ask. But very quickly here, for the sake of time, page 9, executive summary, page 9. Now you can go to splcenter.org and download this study. I took it to the printer, got it printed up. I teach from this. High school seniors struggle on even the most basic questions about American enslavement of Africans. Only 8% of high school seniors surveyed, it was 1,000 surveyed. Only 8%, 8, not 80, 8. Only 8% of high school seniors surveyed can identify slavery as the central cause of the Civil War. 2/3 or 68% of high school seniors surveyed did not know that it took a constitutional amendment to formally end slavery. That was the 13th Amendment of 1865. Fewer than 1 in 4 students, or 22%, can correctly identify how provisions in the Constitution gave advantages to slaveholders. You mean Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, known as the Three-Fifths Compromise of 1787? Are you talking about that? And how the Electoral College helped because slave-owning states had an advantage in the Electoral College? And this is how Thomas Jefferson won the 1800 presidential election, with the Electoral College votes associated with Virginia. And Virginia was the largest slaveholding state in the Union at the time. So go read this. Because if the 12th graders don't know, that probably means their parents don't know. Well, the members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the members of the U.S. Senate, they represent these 12th graders' parents. They represent their parents. So as I said before, I did a Facebook post today. Somebody commented on this. You know, because I find a lot of people who talk about we want reparations. When I ask them how do we get it, they can't tell me. And don't understand that based upon Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, Congress controls the purse strings. So you have to go through the legislative branch of government, both chambers, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. So, all right. But anyway, this is why America needs a massive history lesson. All this ties into history. All this ties into history. And your thoughts create feelings. Your feelings create actions and behaviors. Your actions and behaviors create results. The trajectory of history, where we are right now, is based upon a trajectory of history. Historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the culmination of a sequence of historical events. And as one of my teachers, Professor Kaba Hiawatha Kamene, says, Professor Kaba, to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. This is why we have to understand history. So let's go back to this quickly here. And we have any, let me know if we have any callers, Shakita. Let's go back to this where we have it. Okay. So The report seems to be a response to the New York Times 1619 project, which traced the story of slavery through American history and became a lightning rod, for Trump and conservatives who saw it as an attack on their American history. The report, written by a group of mostly white and conservative academics, claims that the nation's founders detested slavery, even though many of them owned enslaved people. It suggests that the Declaration of Independence eventually led to the end of slavery in the U.S., barely mentioning the Civil War's decisive role in abolition. They're just all over the place. Okay. Now, when we look at the Philadelphia Convention of 1787, it is true you're going to have some there were 39 signers of the U.S. Constitution. It is true that some of them were against slavery. Some of them belonged to manumission societies. It is true that by 1787, 5 states had already abolished slavery. The first state to abolish slavery was Vermont, July 2nd, 1777. You're going to have Massachusetts. You're going to have Connecticut. You're going to have Pennsylvania. Okay, that is true. And it's also true that they debated over abolishing the international transatlantic slave trade. And all the states agreed to abolish the international transatlantic slave trade, which means the importing of Africans into this country to enslave them. All of them agreed to it except South Carolina. So they put a 20-year clause in the U.S. Constitution that the earliest they could abolish the international transatlantic slave trade would be January 1st, 1808 or 1808. Okay. And that's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which lays the foundation for a legal argument for reparations. But since a lot of people don't understand history or law, we ain't dealing with legal arguments for reparations. So we'll go to the phone lines in just a second. We'll go to Ronnie in just a second. Britannica.com has information dealing with the founding fathers and slavery. Okay. And I just pulled this out because this is in my file folder for the online course that I teach. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. So I'm going to be teaching that class again. I'm putting together, I got to figure out the date it's going to launch. This is a 8-session, 16-hour online course that I teach that deals with thousands of years of history, and it deals with what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade happening, and it deals with better understanding the transatlantic slave trade. We deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, etc. Because you can't understand it. Starting the transatlantic slave trade, understanding it in the mid 15th century, starting in 1441 with the Portuguese going into Mauritania. If you start in the mid 15th century, you don't understand the transatlantic slave trade. You got to deal with hundreds of years of history of Africans going into Europe and the wars and the conflicts between these Africans known as the Moors and Europeans, and how it's the African Moors who were changing the complexion of Europe. And you have to understand that from 711 AD to January 2nd, 1492, you have to understand that period of time to understand the transatlantic slave trade, because the transatlantic slave trade is a continuation of what was taking place in Europe. But just very quickly here for the sake of time, then we're going to go to the phone lines. Let's see here. The founding fathers and slavery. The founding fathers and slavery. Let's see. Is this on? Okay, here we go. This is from Britannica.com. Britannica, this is a really, really good research source that I use. Britannica.com, official website of Encyclopedia Britannica. The founding fathers and slavery. Although many of the founding fathers, or as Dr. Francis Cress Wilson called them, the fondling fathers, although many of the founding fathers acknowledged that slavery violated the core American revolutionary idea of liberty, their simultaneous commitment to private property rights, principles of limited government, and intersectional harmony prevented them from making a bold move against slavery. The the considerable investment of Southern founders in slave-based staple agriculture, combined with their deep-seated racial prejudice, posed additional obstacles to emancipation. Okay, and this is, let me see, make sure. Okay, in this initial draft. Okay, so this is looking at the, I think this is looking at the Declaration of Independence. But just in general, slaveholders among prominent founding fathers. So it breaks it down between non-slave holders and slaveholders. Non-slave holders: John Adams, Samuel Adams, Oliver Ellsworth, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Paine, Roger Sherman, Robert Treat Paine. Slaveholders: Thomas Jefferson, John Jay College in New York is named after Patrick Henry, Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock. Now, Benjamin Franklin is going to, if I remember correctly, Benjamin Franklin is going to join the New York Manumission Society. So you're going to have a few of them who end up renouncing slavery and end up joining manumission societies. Despite initial agreements over despite initial disagreements over slavery at the Constitutional Convention in 1787, the founders once again demonstrated their commitment to maintaining the unity of the United States by resolving to diffuse sectional tensions over slavery. To this end, the founders drafted a series of constitutional clauses acknowledging deep-seated regional differences over slavery, while requiring all sections of the new country to make compromises as well. Okay, so this deals with, in part, yeah, this deals with the, let me see, what is this? Held slaves at the point in time. All right, so take a look at this, because I think this chart here is talking about the Declaration of Independence. Condemn and drafted declaration. Okay. But it also talks about the U.S. Constitution as well. Nevertheless, the founders with this. Okay. Let me just go quickly to page 2 here. Nevertheless, the founders, with the exception of those from South Carolina and Georgia, exhibited considerable aversion to slavery during the area of the Articles of Confederation, 1771 to 1789. The Articles of Confederation was the government structure before the U.S. Constitution, okay? By prohibiting the importation of foreign slaves to individual states and lending their support to a proposal by Thomas Jefferson to ban slavery in the Northwest Territory. Such anti-slavery policies, however, only went so far. The prohibition of foreign slave imports by limiting the foreign supply conveniently served the interests of Virginia and Maryland slaveholders, who could then sell their own surplus slaves southward and westward at higher prices. Furthermore, the ban on slavery in the Northwest tacitly legitimated the expansion of slavery in the Southwest. So basically what happened was you had people like Thomas Jefferson who were for cutting off the supply of Africans coming into this country, because they felt that if you cut off the supply, that increased the value of the African slaves who were already here, which would increase their wealth and increase their profit when they sell slaves, if you cut off the supply of Africans coming to this country. So check this out here from Britannica.com. Let's go quickly to the phone lines. Let's go to Ronnie, line 1. Ronnie, thanks for holding. Welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from, Ronnie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Is this Ronnie?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Thanks. Tell us where you're calling from. Thanks for holding.
Sure, I'm calling from New York.
New York, okay.
Yeah. I'm actually Jamaica Queens.
Jamaica Queens.
With the Yep.
Go ahead.
So I'm calling with a question.
Sure.
So earlier, well, first of all, I'm very glad that you brought up the statistic about high school students, because I recently just wrote a curriculum for AP Civics, and it, and I feel like the only time that children are really getting the information that they need, they have to go the extra mile. But that's the same with adults, right?
Right. AP Civics. Okay.
Yeah. In that in the spirit of that, here's my question. So earlier you were talking about some of the senators and some of the GOP lawmakers are probably going to lose their job if they continue to, suggest and encourage sedition.
Possibly, yeah.
I know that there is a historical precedent for this after the Civil War. What is the line of succession for like a senator or a House representative?
Well, the governor, it's up to the governor of that state to replace a senator or a member of the House of Representatives who is removed, or it's possible the governor could leave that position open, but they will be replaced by the governor of that state. The governor would choose somebody. So, for instance, Senator Kelly Loeffler, who was just defeated by Reverend Raphael Warnock in Georgia, she was chosen by the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, to finish out the previous senator's term. Okay, so it's up to the governor.
I see. Is that I know you said it's the governor, but is that, I know for each state they have different laws. Is that something that's across the board that the federal government expects of?
I don't know a state necessarily where it's different. Usually it's the governor. In general, usually it's the governor. In some cases, the position may be left open. So, for instance, when Representative John Conyers of the 13th Congressional District here in Detroit, when he retired from the House of Representatives, the no good governor that we had here, Rick Snyder did not put somebody in that House seat. He just left it vacant. Rick Snyder was a Republican. It could be a situation where, so hypothetically, if a Republican governor wants to do harm, they could just, and say it's a seat that a Democrat has, they could just leave the seat open and not fill it, theoretically.
Okay, and that would change. Let's say they got rid of 3 or 4 of the senators in the House and in the Senate. Would that change who leads the Senate then?
Well, no, not if it's Republicans. No, because the Democrat, because for the 117th Congress, Democrats control the House of Representatives and they control the U.S. Senate also, because of the 50-50 tie in the Senate and Kamala Harris having a tiebreaker vote. So Chuck Schumer becomes Senate Majority Leader in the Senate.
Okay. So, I guess one of the scenarios is they get removed, and then those people just are not going to be represented until the next cycle.
It depends if the governor replaces them. It depends if the governor puts somebody in that seat. Okay. It's just like the governor Gavin Newsom, had to replace Senator Kamala Harris because she became vice president. He had to put somebody in her seat, the senator. Okay. Very quickly, we're out of time for this show. How can people get in contact with you if they want to know more about your curriculum?
So the curriculum was for paid website, so I can't give that out.
Okay.
It was fun to do.
Okay. You can call back tomorrow. We're out of time here, but thanks for calling. You can call back tomorrow. Okay. All right.
All right. You take care.
All right. Thanks. Okay. Hey, those watching on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, keep watching. We're going to keep broadcasting for a little while longer. We're out of time here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. All right. Stand by, everybody. Stand by. Okay. All right. This hour goes by quickly. Hey, if you like this type of information, also you can donate to the African History Network, $ the TheAHNShow through Cash App, $ the TheAHNShow through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, paypal.me/TheAHNShow, as well through PayPal, or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, let's continue here for a little while longer. I want to go back to the article here from NBC News, and we're going to look at this one quickly from CNN also. All right. So the report seems to be a response to the New York Times 1619 Project, which traced the story of slavery through American history and became a lightning rod for Trump and conservatives who saw it as an attack on their view of American history. The report, written by a group of mostly white conservative academics, claims that the nation's founders detested slavery, even though many of them owned enslaved people. Scholars assailed the report, with one comparing it to a bad middle school civic textbook from 1955. You know, it was a bunch of white supremacists and their Negro sympathizers that put this nonsense together, which is why, probably Donald Trump chose them. Okay. Let's see here. Let's pull this back up. All right. Here we go. All right. So scholars assailed the report, with one comparing it to a bad middle school civic textbook from 1955. That's before the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. And another dismissing it as, quote, racist nonsense from the early 20th century, accentuated by some Southern strategy and a culture war paranoia. Okay, so, quote, don't open it, delete the file, burn your computer, and make sure to salt the earth wherever the people on the commission go, added another. James Grossman, executive director of the American Historical Association, told NBC News that he didn't make it past the table of contents and a single section titled "The American Mind" before concluding that the report was likely a failure. Quote, there is no single American mind. This alone signals that this report will fail to appreciate the diversity of ideas, cultures, and perspectives that is one of the great assets of our nation, end quote. Citing a section of the report that compared affirmative action to ideas advanced by John C. Calhoun, the Southern politician and ardent defender of slavery, Grossman added that the document is, quote, offensive to Dr. King's legacy, end quote. Now, the White House also issued an executive order. The White House also issued an executive order from Trump on Monday, Dr. King Day, playing a similar chord, offering details for his proposed National Garden of American Heroes, an idea he first promoted last summer during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests and the removal of monuments honoring Confederate soldiers and other controversial historical figures. All right, so check out the rest of this article here. This is from NBC News. On MLK Day, Biden volunteers, Trump issues divisive report on slavery and civil rights. Now, these are some of the same people that support this report and put it together. They're going to talk about healing. Oh, we need to heal. No, don't impeach Donald Trump. No, don't convict him in the Senate No, don't prosecute any of the senators or members of the House of Representatives that were involved in conspiring to overthrow the government. No, don't go after anybody who's trying to nullify the votes of African Americans and trying to object to the certification of votes from that were certified by the Electoral College December 14th. No, don't do anything like that. No, we just need to heal. All right, so check that out. I just find it interesting when people get caught, they want to heal. They want to talk about healing and all that stuff. 3 weeks ago, they were talking about trying to overturn election results in Georgia, and Donald Trump was putting pressure on Raffensperger, the Secretary of State in Georgia. Okay, then we found out there was a second call to Georgia. Just 3 weeks ago, they're trying to overturn election results and filing lawsuits. Now they want to talk about healing. They weren't talking about healing then. So then CNN has this article. Trump administration issues racist school curriculum report on MLK Day by Megan Vasquez. Okay, Trump administration issues racist school report on MLK Day. And we're just going to highlight what's not redundant. Okay, let's see here. This deals with the little 1776 commission report. So a commission stood up by Donald Trump as a rebuttal to schools applying a more accurate history curriculum around slavery in the U.S. issued its inflammatory report on Monday, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So Trump announced that he was establishing the commission last fall, following a slew of Black Lives Matter demonstrations across the country. He blamed the school curriculum from the New York Times, because there's a school curriculum also that's the New York, that's the 1619 Project. They have a school curriculum also, and then they have the series of articles in the New York Times. Okay, so Trump announced this commission last summer during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations across the country. He blamed the school curriculum for violence that resulted from some of the protests, saying that, quote, the left-wing rioting and mayhem are the direct result of decades of left-wing indoctrination in our schools. How'd you blame the violence? The curriculum just came out. How'd you blame the violence in the streets that's a result to oppression and police violence? How'd you blame the 1619 Project school curriculum that just came out for the violence in the street? The commission is an apparent counter to the New York Times 1619 Project, Pulitzer Prize winning project aimed at teaching American students about slavery. Trump, speaking last fall, called the project, quote unquote, toxic propaganda. Toxic propaganda. Now, this commission will probably be dissolved under the Biden administration because the sitting U.S. president typically has the power to dissolve existing presidential commissions and advisory councils, like Trump dissolved the 21st Century Task Force on Policing that President Obama convened. Trump got rid of that, which sometimes provides reports and recommendations to the White House. Okay, so let me see here. Just a second. I made some notes here. So a White House statement calls the report, quote, a dispositive rebuttal of reckless re-education attempts. And let me see, let's scroll down in this here. A White House statement calls the report a dispositive rebuttal of reckless re-education attempts that seek to reframe American history around the idea that the United States is not an exceptional country, but an evil one. The report, released less than 2 weeks after supporters of Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol building, calls today's ideological divisions akin to those experienced during the Civil War. But you helped inflame these divisions for the past 4 years. I mean, this is the same guy that vetoed the National Defense and Authorization Act, partly because it called for renaming military bases named after traitors to the Union who were part of the Confederacy, Confederate soldiers and heroes and things like this. And he vetoed the National Defense and Authorization Act partly because of that. And he said he was going to do that. He said he didn't want to rename the bases. And you're talking about divisions? Americans are deeply divided about the meaning of their country, its history, and how it should be governed. The division is severe enough to call to mind the disagreements between the colonists and King George. King George III, this is who the 13 colonies are revolting against, the King of England. And those between Confederate and Union forces during the Civil War, end quote, the report states. Now, the commission is, let's see, the report authors also argued the civil rights movement was almost immediately turned to programs that ran counter to the lofty ideas of the founders, specifically criticizing the affirmative action policies. Now, the commission is chaired by Larry Arnn, A-R-N-N, A-R-N-N, Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College. He drew criticism for his comments in 2013. He said state officials visited the college to see whether enough dark ones were enrolled. The commission's vice chair, Carol Swan, once wrote that Islam poses an absolute danger to us and our children. Okay, that's Carol Swan. So the article I was looking for about Carol Swan is from blackenterprise.com. Former Princeton professor says Democrats are using black people to advance a radical agenda. A radical, what the hell? What's the radical agenda? After 4 years of Trump, what's the radical agenda? I'm not exactly sure what the radical agenda is. I don't agree with all the policies of the Democrats, but I agree with them a lot more than policies of Republicans. But anyway, Dr. Carol Swan said, let's see here. Let's see. You stop this little ad in here. Former Princeton professor Carol Swan told Fox News the Democratic Party, this is from July 2020. The Democratic Party is using Black Americans to advance its agenda. According to the Western Journal, Carol Swan, an African American who has taught at both Princeton and Vanderbilt, appeared on Fox News, their show Liberty and 11, calling the Black Lives Matter movement a Marxist agenda against America, a Marxist agenda against America. In the same interview, Carol Swan added that Democrats, quote, are using black people to advance a radical agenda that will be destructive to our nation, that will hurt all of us and is hurting us right now. Destructive to our nation. What did you call that influx of 8,000 domestic terrorists on January 6th? Trying to overthrow the government and trying to stop the certification of electoral college votes. And that was during a joint session of Congress, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate. And that certification is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. I'm just curious. What did you call that? Now, and let's see. Let's show you this one so you know exactly who I'm talking about. Check this out from blackenterprise.com. Former Princeton professor says Democrats are using black people to advance a radical agenda. What agenda were Republicans trying to advance when they tried to overturn the votes of African Americans and nullify our votes? What agenda were they trying to what agenda were they trying to push? It certainly wasn't one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. What agenda was Mitch McConnell pushing when they couldn't come to an agreement on a coronavirus bill? They got the $900 billion bill. But look how many months that took. Democrats passed the $3.4 trillion HEROES Act May 15th, 2020. Mitch McConnell sent he sent the Senate on a 1-month recess during the summer, and they hadn't come to an agreement on a coronavirus bill. And then they allowed the $600 a week in federal unemployment insurance to expire July 31st, 2020, and hadn't passed a coronavirus bill. In the same interview, Swan also said Black Lives Matter is not a civil rights organization, but a political one. She then explained that Black Lives Matter and people who support far left politics are trying to advance a narrative of quote unquote systemic racism to help them achieve that goal. They're trying to advance a narrative of systemic racism to help them achieve that goal. Because racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. People like this don't even want to acknowledge systemic racism exists, like Donald Trump, like Attorney General William Barr, former Attorney General William Barr, don't even want to acknowledge systemic racism exists. She contended the quote false narrative of systemic racism is being pushed due to the election. Quote, I am an American success story, said Dr. Carol Swan, who was part of this dumbass commission, 1776 commission. I am an American success story, she said in explaining why she rejects the presence of systemic racism against African Americans in the United States. Swan dropped out of high school in the 8th grade and had 3 children by age 20, but she attended community college and eventually became a successful university professor who earned early tenure at Princeton University. So you're an educated fool who doesn't understand racism and white supremacy, what it is and how it works. And as Dr. Francis Cress Wilson and Nellie Fuller correctly taught us, if you do not understand European white supremacy and racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you think that you understand will totally confuse you. The Black Lives Matter movement and protests have had a resurgence during the coronavirus pandemic. So this is back during July 2020. Okay, so Dr. Carol Swan added, it's her love for America and the opportunities living here provided her that make her especially horrified by the rhetoric and objectives of the Black Lives Matter movement. Quote, it's clear that this movement to tear down monuments is really to divide the country. The movement is not about tearing down monuments, but what did they tear down these domestic terrorist thugs that was sent to the U.S. Capitol building by Donald Trump? Tear down monument. Which are you? You're not referring to Confederate monuments, are you? It's clear that this movement to tear down monuments is really to divide the country. You wouldn't be talking about Confederate. You wouldn't be talking about taking down Confederate monuments that were erected to honor traitors to the Union, but also designed to terrorize African Americans. This is why those Confederate monuments were erected. They weren't erected right after the Civil War ended. The majority of the Confederate monuments are erected between 1894 and 1914. And then you have a period of time of about 1955 to 1970, somewhere around there. There was a good chart from which publication was that? I have it in Firefox. I think what was the Southern Poverty Law Center. Let me see. This is one, but there was another one. This is not the one I was looking for. There was another one. When you look at the Confederate monuments, the main reason why they're erected was to terrorize African Americans and to remind us of the position, the low level position in society that we were supposed to have. This is why those Confederate monuments were erected. Okay. There was a, was it this one right here? All right, we'll look at the one from. Well, I'll show you two things. First of all, let's look at this from Fast Company, fastcompany.com, because there's still about 1,700 Confederate monuments. So when I hear people now, I'm against. I've said this before. I'm against individuals taking it upon themselves to tear down monuments. I'm totally against that, even Confederate monuments, because I don't want anybody doing that to monuments of Dr. King or Rosa Parks or Octavius Cato in Philadelphia or something like that. If city councils decide to take down Confederate monuments, or the state legislature or governor or something like that to take down Confederate monuments, that's fine. I'm totally against people taking upon themselves to tear down monuments, period. I'm totally against that. Okay. So if we look at this article here from Fast Company, this map reveals 1,747 monuments and other Confederate symbols of America's racial past. The map was compiled by the Southern Poverty Law Center to show how prolific glorification of the Confederacy is, how prolific glorification of the Confederacy is. Now, this article is from June 11th, 2020. June 11th, 2020. Okay. Let's see here. All right, so as you guessed, they're largely in the South. Okay, then we have this chart here, and this is the, we'll blow this up, we'll pull this up. There's another article that shows this, all right? But I just want you to see this. A lot of people don't know that there are this many Confederate monuments that still exist today. All right. So when you deal with, once again, as somebody who's a historian and does lectures across the country, I get to travel and I get to speak to people in different regions of the country. Americans in general are very, very ignorant of history. And I'm not just talking about African Americans, I'm talking about Americans in general, regardless of race. Okay. So when we talk about getting reparations, America has to have a massive history lesson. America has to have a massive history lesson because most Americans don't think a debt is owed because of the history they've been taught. Most Americans don't believe a debt is owed. A lot of them are members of the House of Representatives in the U.S. Senate who have to vote on reparations, which is why H.R. 40 hasn't even passed the House of Representatives. If you can't get a bill passed to study reparations, how you get one passed to pay reparations? So the other one, the other article, the one I just saw, the chart, and this is not the real one that I was looking for, but it will do, is, let's try to blow this up as much as we can. Okay. Now this shows 153 years of Confederate iconography. All right. And this deals with when Confederate monuments were erected and things like this, right? And you see the largest period of time when you have Confederate monuments erected, you're going to have, say, from right around 1910 1911 or so, 1912, you're going to have this period of time erected, and you're going to have from about right around 1894 up until about 1914. This is going to be the period of time when you have a lot of them erected, and then you're going to have also from somewhere in the 1950s, 1955 through 1970. But the biggest period of time that you had Confederate monuments and things like this erected is not right after the Civil War ends. Civil War ends in 1875. No, it's going to be this period of time from about 1894 to right about 1914. Okay, and we know 1915. Now this is really good because it shows you historical markers, historical checkpoints, right? Ku Klux Klan being founded, they say 1866. My research says December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee is when the Ku Klux Klan was founded. But the United Daughters of the Confederacy, founded in 1894, as we talked about on yesterday's show. Then Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case, which solidified Jim Crow laws, 1896. Sons of Confederate Veterans, established 1896. Various Confederate memorials associations hold their first national meeting, 1900. NAACP founded in 1909. Klan's resurgency as Invisible Empire, 1915, spurred by the movie The Birth of a Nation. Okay, The Birth of a Nation. They came out February 8th, 1915. And for the first 30 days that the movie The Birth of a Nation was out, it was called The Klansman. Okay, and the movie The Birth of a Nation is based upon a novel by a man named Reverend Thomas Dixon. And the heroes of the movie are the Ku Klux Klan. The movie takes place during slavery, the Civil War, and Reconstruction. And the Klan are the heroes. And by 1915, 1915 was the 50th year anniversary of the Civil War ending and the 13th Amendment, freeing the slaves. In 1915, by 1915, a lot of the Klan members had died out by then. Okay, and a lot of the people who fought in the Civil War, a lot of them had died out by 1915, and the Klan had largely died out by 1915. When we think of the Ku Klux Klan, people just think of the Klan as just operating continuously and being dominant and things like this. This is not the case. The Klan had largely died out by 1915. It's going to be rejuvenated. You have a second incarnation that started in late 1915. Okay, late 1915, and there was an article, and I forgot which publication that was. I was reading. I was just reading a few days ago. What was the name of that one? Well, for the sake of time, this one will do. This is from history.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. History.com. And I read a lot of articles from history.com. This is not the one I was looking for, but it'll do. You'll get the point. July 29th, 2019. Originally, it was updated August 14th, 2018. How the Birth of a Nation revived the Ku Klux Klan. How the Birth of a Nation revived the Ku Klux Klan. D.W. Griffith's controversial epic 1915 film about the Civil War and Reconstruction depicted the Ku Klux Klan as valiant saviors of a post-war South ravaged by Northern carpetbaggers and freed blacks. Okay. So let's see here. For the sake of time, we're not going to go through all of this. Shortly after the Los Angeles launched, Thomas Dixon convinced President Woodrow Wilson to screen the movie. Thomas Dixon Jr., who wrote the novel. Let's see here. Although the quotes often, let's see. William Joseph Simmons is William Joseph Simmons is considered to be the founder of the 1915 modern Ku Klux Klan. While recovering from a car accident, the local preacher in Georgia followed the birth of a nation's nationwide success. Joseph Simmons was a Reverend, William Joseph Simmons. He is the one who revives the Ku Klux Klan in 1915 after seeing the film The Birth of a Nation. He was a Reverend also. There were KKK-inspired aprons, costumes, and regalia that glorified the defunct organization. Simmons seized on the film's popularity to bolster the Klan's appeal again. It wasn't just fraught with racial tensions it wasn't just the fraught racial tensions that made the timing of a rebirth feasible. The way the film was made with innovative editing techniques and close-up action shots was captivating. Okay, so read the rest of this article. I don't have time to get through this just for the sake of time. I just want you to understand. This is why we have to understand the chronology of history. Okay, and then going into 1915 is during World War I, which is 1914 and 1918. Then in 1919, you have a racial explosion in this country called the Red Summer. And I re-aired the presentation I did dealing with African-American World War I veterans who took up arms to fight against white supremacists attacking their communities during the Red Summer of 1919. There were over 25 major race riots in this country. And African-American World War I veterans defended their communities. Okay. All right, we got to continue for the sake of time here. Very quickly, back to this article from CNN, because I got to move on. The report argues, let's see here, where is that? The commission is chaired by Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. Okay, the 1776 commission that Carol Swan is on. Dr. Carol Swan is the vice chair of the commission. Okay, so you see she's lost. So I can see why she's on this commission. The report argues that identity politics are, quote, the opposite of Dr. King's hope that his children would live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. I just find it very interesting when you have these right-wing Republicans / white supremacists who want to quote Dr. King in I Have a Dream, but don't want to deal with Dr. King talking about dismantling white supremacy and racism. They just skip over all that and go to the content of his character and the little black children and white children holding hands and all this stuff. They just skip over all of that. Okay. The report argues that identity politics are, quote, the opposite of King's hope that his children would live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, end quote. Now, commission members also took aim at feminists and the wide use of ethnic and racial identities in American life, arguing that they were constructed by, quote unquote, activists. Okay, now pay attention to this. A radical women's liberation movement reimagined America as a patriarchal system, asserting that every woman is a victim of oppression by men. The Black Power and Black nationalist movements reimagined America as a white supremacist regime. Meanwhile, other activists constructed artificial groupings to further divide Americans by race, creating new categories like Asian American and Hispanic to teach Americans to think of themselves in terms of group identities and to rouse various groups into politically cohesive bodies, the report states. But see, so the question I have to ask them is then, what are you calling an American? See, the question I have to, because being an American is citizenship. That does not mean you give up your ethnicity. And then when we talk about white people, they talk about being Italian Americans, German Americans, Irish Americans. They don't give up their identity. They don't give up their ancestry. American is not ancestry, it's citizenship. But they don't give up their ethnicity. They're still connected. Hungarian, Swedish. So, when I see things like that, now, when I see things like that, it causes me to really ask the question, okay, so how are you identifying American? Because it really seems like you're identifying American based upon European values, but you don't want to say it because you don't want people to identify with their ethnicity and ancestry. So you just want to use this generic term as dealing with American, but when you talk about American, you're talking about European values, but you don't want to say it. When you say we're all Americans, what does that mean? And then you want to talk about assimilation, assimilating to which values? Values from who? You're talking about European values, but you don't want to say it. So you use the term American. Now, if we really want to get deep with this, and I don't for the sake of time, but we really want to get deep with this and just throw a whole don't want to use the term monkey wrench, but okay. We really want to get deep with this, right? We can take this to a whole nother level. If we look at the 1828 Noah Webster Dictionary, if we look at the 1828 edition of the Noah Webster Dictionary, and we look at the term American, if I just really want to just throw them just knock them off their chair, right? We look at the terms, go to the 1828 Noah Webster Dictionary. It's online. It's on the internet. When we look at the original term American originally meant a native of America. It originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Well, wait a second. When we talk about the term American and who it originally applied to, American did not originally apply to Europeans. The term American originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper-colored races that were found in the Americas by Europeans. So that then takes us back to the book by Dr. David Imhotep, the first Americans were Africans, documented evidence. Because African people are the original Americans. If I just really want to just knock them out, okay? If I just really want to mess with them and knock them out, the, the original Americans are African people and then Native Americans. All right, but I don't have time to knock them out tonight. So we're not going I don't have time to deal with that tonight. So, but anyway, but if I really wanted to knock them out, I could. All right. So read the rest of this article here from CNN, this 1776 report. And there's some flaws with the 1619 report, as I've talked about before. And my friend Dr. Darrell Scott, history professor at Harvard University, talks about this as well. And he's done a number of Facebook posts dealing with this, right? And we see that Donald Trump pardons Stephen Bannon. Okay. Okay, so one of his little criminal friends. He did a Facebook post, and I made some notes. I've talked about it here on the show, dealing with the 1619 project. The 1619 project is flawed, but I don't attack it. They need to correct some things, but I don't attack it, especially like Donald Trump has. But if we look at this here, let me see here. I made 1619 project. Okay, so here's some. There were 5 comments that Dr. Darrell Scott made about the 1619 project. Racism. Racism did not begin in 1619. Racism existed before 1619. I think these were claims. These were claims that the 1619 project made. Okay, racism did not begin in 1619. 2, slavery was not a primary cause of the American Revolution, as the 1619 project claims. 3, African American history is not the story of racism and victimhood. Our actual history is ignored. So a lot of times, I understand what he's saying. A lot of times we define African American history by racism and victimhood as our history is much broader than that. Yes, there's racism that existed. Yes, it impacted our history, but a lot of times we just see our history through racism and victimhood, and that's not the case. That's a total misunderstanding of history. Okay, we were inventors and landowners. We've been prosperous, things like this. So just to see our history through the lens of victimhood and racism is a total misunderstanding of our history. And then he deals with mass incarceration did not arise from the 13th Amendment. He's correct, because the 13th Amendment, for the sake of time, I don't have time to get deep into this. The 13th Amendment of 1865 is based upon the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And in the with the 13th Amendment, what they're doing is they're giving the same rights that white men have to African American men, basically. Okay, they're given those same rights. So when they talk about slavery being prohibited unless convicted of a crime, that law already applied to white men. That was not something special for African Americans. This comes from a lack of understanding of history. That goes back to the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. That law already applied to white men. That's 1865. Then 1866, you have the Civil Rights Act of 1866, because it's then given more rights to African Americans and the rights to enter into contractual agreements and business agreements, things like that. It's given the rights that white men have to African Americans. So you're going to have a series of laws and amendments. 14th Amendment dealing with citizenship, 15th Amendment dealing with guaranteeing the right to vote, even though nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it explicitly give anyone the right to vote. We've talked about this before. But so this is what's taking place. And when you study the, we're going to wrap this up in a minute here. When you study when really mass incarceration starts, is not at this period of time. It's not 1865. It's not the early 1900s. No. It starts in 1971 with June 17th, 1971, when Richard Nixon declares his war on drugs. And when we see the real increase in the prison population, it goes back to the early 1970s. And basically from 1970 to 1993, we see the U.S. prison population quadruples. It goes from about 300,000 in 1970 to about 1.3 million in 1993. You can go to bjs.gov, Bureau of Justice Statistics, and you can research the prison populations there. So what happened was Dr. Darrell Scott spoke at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History a couple of years ago. And we all went to dinner with them afterwards, members of ASALH, Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which is the organization that Dr. Carter G. Woodson co-founded, right? So it was Jamon Jordan, who's a brilliant historian here in Detroit, and myself and some other people. We went to dinner with them. So Jamon and I and Dr. Darrell Scott, we had like a conversation for 2 hours. And he's been doing posts on social media dealing with, because he also teaches a class at Howard University dealing with from slavery to mass incarceration. And he talks about the 13thers, and the people think that mass incarceration is because of the 13th Amendment. No, it's not. It's not. And the question he asked was, when the Civil War ends in 1865, South Carolina in 1866 built their first state prison. They had county prisons before then, but they built their first state prison. South Carolina is where the Civil War starts. South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, December 20th, 1860, 6 weeks after Abraham Lincoln becomes president-elect. And this is going, and South Carolina is where the Civil War starts, April 12, 1861, with the attack on Fort Sumter. So he said, okay, so if the 13th Amendment was designed to re-enslave African Americans and is going to bring about mass incarceration, when they built their first state prison in South Carolina, how many beds did they have? He said it was 100. They only had 100 beds. When you go study the trajectory of this, it takes something like, I think it was like 106 years from 1865 to 1971 for this whole mass incarceration thing to really kick off, when you understand the trajectory of this and chronology. And I realized this back in 2016, I did a lecture called Dealing with the History of Richard Nixon's War on Drugs. How Richard Nixon's war on drugs was a war on the African American community. And I did a lot of research and putting together this presentation and studying the war on drugs and studying prison populations and quote unquote what we call mass incarceration. And I already saw the documentary 13th from Ava DuVernay, which is all right. It's problematic. The documentary is problematic if you actually understand history, because their premise is false. The 13th Amendment did not create mass incarceration. No, that's BS. The premise is false. So after doing all my research, preparing for that lecture, the question I kept coming up with over and over again after I studied this chronology of history, I kept asking myself, if the 13th Amendment was created to re-enslave African Americans and bring about mass incarceration, why did it take 106 years for mass incarceration to happen? Because you had relatively low prison rates throughout history. You had relatively low prison rates throughout history. Why did it take 106 years to bring into existence what the law was designed to bring into existence? That didn't make sense, because it's not connected. That's why. So then in talking to him and doing more research, I found out about the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. But yeah, no, this is why you have to study history. because when I was working on that lecture and laying out all this history and going through the early 1900s and things like this, and the federal prison industry, 1934, 1938, which becomes Unicor in 1978 and things like this. I'm like, why did it take so long for this whole thing to jump off like it did? So, all right. And then lastly, number 5 was American history is not reducible to race and racism. American history is not reducible to race and racism. But so there's some good information in the 1619 project, but there's some flaws. And one of the problems is it doesn't deal with the African presence in this land largely prior to 1619. Let's talk a little bit about 1526 in South Carolina. The Africans taken into South Carolina 1526. I think it may mention Juan Garrido in 1513 coming into Florida with Juan Ponce de Leon, the Spanish conquistador. But the information that's in this book here, the first Americans were Africans, documented evidence, the 1619 project ignores. That's problematic because this was our land stolen from us. Yeah, African people, we've been in this land going back at least 51,700 years ago. All right. Okay, so let's see here. Some of the stuff we may have to deal with tomorrow. Okay, 127 Republicans voted to overturn the election results. And okay, very quickly here, and we're gonna have to we'll probably deal with that some more tomorrow. 147 let's see, 147 Republicans in Congress voted against certifying Democrat Joe Biden as the winner of the presidential election this month. Not only did they try to overturn the election results and give legitimacy to Donald Trump's lies of rampant voter fraud, but they essentially tried to erase the mammoth turnout of African-American voters that helped Donald Trump win. Okay. Now, just very quickly here, Trump giving these pardons to his little criminal friends. I don't know if Pat Cipollone and these other attorneys, I don't know if they told him, but when they accept your presidential pardon, they give up their First Amendment right against incriminating themselves. So if they're subpoenaed to testify in court, they cannot plead the Fifth Amendment because you already gave them a pardon. Okay, when you understand the powers of the pardon, when you give somebody a pardon, they can't invoke the Fifth Amendment if it's if they have to testify in court, like surrounding circumstances around or crimes that they may or may not have committed to receive the pardon. So these people he's getting pardons to, Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Stephen Bannon, all these little criminal friends of his, they could very well be witnesses testifying against him in court, and they can't invoke their First Amendment right. Okay. So we have 127 Republicans who voted to overturn election results are now praising Dr. King. We have Ted Cruz, little spineless Ted Cruz, who said Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. transformed America, inspired men and women across the world with this call to pursue justice and truth. Senator Ted Cruz said. Let's see here. Let me try to blow this up. We're going to get out of here in a minute. How's everybody doing? If you like this type of information, also you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN Show, paypal.me / the AHN Show. This helps us Keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. Okay. This is from Huffington Post. 127 Republicans who voted to overturn the election results are now praising MLK. By refusing to certify the Electoral College results, the GOP lawmakers were denying the voices of Black voters who turned out heavily for Joe Biden. All right, now, let's close this. So we see Ted Cruz's comments. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. transformed America and inspired men and women across the world with this call to pursue justice and truth. But you were lying, Ted Cruz. You were lying. Representative Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado, tweeted the quote from Dr. King: "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." But you are a QAnon supporter, you dumbass. You're a QAnon supporter and a Donald Trump supporter. Representative Lauren Boebert is a supporter of the deranged, baseless QAnon conspiracy theory. Okay, this nonsense. Then the NAACP tweeted to Kelly McEnany, outgoing press secretary. Good. I'll be so glad not to see her ignorant behind. NAACP tweeted, "Press sec, you dare not utter the words of a man who sacrificed his life in the fight for equality and truth, while you spewed hateful rhetoric and worked in the most hateful and divisive administration in modern history. Hashtag MLK Day is a call to action. Your actions shut up." This is what the this is what the NAACP tweeted. All right. Now, hopefully y'all can y'all see this. Hopefully y'all can see this. Kelly McEnany, White House press secretary conference that Donald Trump saw on Fox News, and then he brought her on to be the White House press secretary. She tweeted, "Today we honor a hero who embodied love and faith in his pursuit for equality, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." All right. Now, Reverend Bernice King, daughter of Dr. King, she tweeted, "I encourage you to study." Well, so she replied to Lauren Boebert, Republican Lauren Boebert, QAnon conspiracy theorist, nonsensical supporter. Bernice King tweeted, "I encourage you to study my father more comprehensively and to attend the King Center's virtual sessions on his nonviolent philosophy and his work to eradicate racism, war, and poverty. A powerful book to start with is his last one, Where Do We Go From Here?" Her dumb ass don't read. I mean, Reverend Bernice King, it's good that you mentioned Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. But Lauren Boebert's dumb ass ain't gonna read. She probably hasn't even read the Constitution. This is Dr. King's probably his most important book, his last book. Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. He wrote it in late 1967. Okay. So, but Reverend Bernice King is correct. And once again, see, this ties into what I was saying earlier. A lot of these Republicans, every year, they always want to praise Dr. King, right? And talk about peace and love and holding hands. But she talked about something that they don't want to mention: eradicating racism. This is what Dr. King was about also, eradicating racism. Okay. And then we got the original tweet here. Let me try to go back. But eradicating racism, war, and poverty. But how do you eradicate racism if you don't want to acknowledge racism exists? Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, benefits, privileges, land, access to education, access to opportunity, etc. And they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. How do you eradicate racism when you don't want to acknowledge that racism exists? Because if you then deal with racism existing and understanding what racism is, then you have to talk about white supremacy. And you have to talk about racism being implemented to preserve genetic white survival. So if you want to talk about Dr. King, but then don't want to talk about eradicating racism, you should keep your mouth shut because you don't understand what you're talking about. All right. We'll probably talk about this some more tomorrow night because they got, when you read this article, they got a whole list of these people who put out statements of Dr. King with links to what they said. So just for the sake of time, well, I don't have a whole much. Just for the sake of time, we'll probably get to some of this tomorrow night. But you can read this article, have a real good laugh. Okay, you got Rick Scott from Florida, John Kennedy from Louisiana. Oh, Cindy Hyde Smith. Oh, the public hanging woman. We got to look at what her statement was. The public hanging woman, Cindy Hyde Smith. Oh, I'm gonna have to respond to her ass person. Cindy Hyde Smith, okay, who votes in lockstep with Donald Trump. Let's see what she said here. No, I gotta show you this. Now, this is gonna be the last one. I gotta show you this one here. Oh my God. Now, maybe on tomorrow's show, there was in I think it was 2019, Reverend William Barber III, who initiated the Moral Mondays and who's he and his organization, they have the Poor People's Campaign. I think it was 2019. He was speaking at a Dr. King Day event. And the governor of the state, I forgot which state he was speaking in. The governor of the state was there on the stage, sitting on the stage while Reverend William Barber III was speaking. The governor was a Republican. Reverend William Barber III called his behind out, right? Because see, once again, you can't spend 364 days out of the year dismantling Dr. King's legacy, then want to show up to the Dr. King Day celebrations and talk about what a good man he was. And you work the rest of the year trying to dismantle his legacy. No, when they show up, like to the Dr. King Day celebrations, we need to call them out. We need to call them out. Okay. So let's look at the public hanging woman. You remember Cindy Hyde Smith, senator from Mississippi. Okay. Back during 2018, when she was running against Mike Espy, African-American man, Mike Espy in 2018. She made a statement. She was talking about one of her supporters, and she said she'd be in the front row at a public hanging if he asked her to attend or something like that. And Mississippi was the state that had the most number of lynchings. Okay, from like 1882 to 1968, Mississippi was the state that had the most number of lynchings. But this is what the public hanging woman, Cindy Hyde Smith, tweeted. This MLK Day marks another year of honoring Dr. King's life. How the hell do you honor Dr. King's life, the public hanging woman? MLK Day of Service is designated as a national day of service to encourage others to celebrate Dr. King's legacy and volunteer to serve their communities. Volunteer, find volunteer opportunities, blah, blah, blah. Okay. MLK Day of Service. I want to know, how do you honor Dr. King's life? It sure as hell ain't the way you vote. When she was running for re-election, she bragged about voting in lockstep with Donald Trump. I think she said 95% of the time. You definitely don't honor Dr. King's life and how you vote. So explain to me how you honor Dr. King's life. I'm just curious since you put it out there. All right. Oh, man. So now I noticed none of them. There was a on The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC on Dr. King Day. There was a quote from Dr. King that he talked about, and this was dealing with the American dilemma. And I don't think any of them quoted this from Dr. King. Okay, but y'all can look this one up. Let me see if I can pull it. Yeah, this one right here. Let's blow this up. If you follow me on the African History Network, I posted on my personal page, Michael Imhotep, and then shared it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. Let's go to this one here from Dr. King. This is one a lot of Republicans, they don't want to deal with this right here. America's chief moral dilemma. Okay, Dr. King said this May 17th, 1967, University of California, Berkeley. Many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship over Black Americans. I don't think any of them quoted this. Okay? I don't think any of them quoted this. Many Americans would like to have a nation which is a democracy for white Americans, but simultaneously a dictatorship for Black Americans. Oh, you mean like overturning our votes because we ain't vote the way you want us to vote? You mean a dictatorship like that? You mean a dictatorship like trying to throw out votes from the Electoral College because they didn't go your way and you just want to ignore those votes? You mean like that? A dictatorship like that? You mean a dictatorship like sending 8,000 domestic terrorists to the U.S. Capitol building to interrupt a joint session of Congress that's mandated by the U.S. Constitution so you can stay in power and overturn the votes of the people? You mean a dictatorship like that? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. So let's see here. Lastly, another horrible milestone to close out the worst presidency probably in U.S. history, definitely modern U.S. history. U.S. coronavirus death toll tops 400,000 in Trump's final hours. Associated Press reported Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. The U.S. death toll comes. The U.S. death toll from the coronavirus eclipsed 400,000 on Tuesday, January 19th, 2021, in the waning hours of the Donald Trump administration, whose handling of the crisis has been judged by public health experts as a singular failure. The running total of lives lost, as compiled by Johns Hopkins University, is nearly equal to the number of Americans killed in World War II. The number of, now, we just talking about basically in a year, 400,000 died. Okay? The number of Americans who have lost their lives due to coronavirus is nearly equal to the number of Americans killed in World War II. Let me see, which one is this? Is this that is morning? And there's another one I was looking for. Where is that? Okay, so it is about the population of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Florida, or New Orleans. It is equivalent to the sea of humanity that was at Woodstock in 1969, 400,000. It is just short of the estimated 409,000 Americans who died in 2019 of strokes, Alzheimer's, diabetes, flu, and pneumonia combined. Okay, it is just short of the 409,000 Americans estimated who died in 2019 of strokes, Alzheimer's, diabetes, the flu, and pneumonia combined. You remember early on with coronavirus, with the deaths, and people put up these numbers of how many people died of flu and say, oh, more people died of flu each year than die of coronavirus. Can't say that now. Where are those people now? You remember people put statistics out like this to try to reduce the casualties, to reduce the severity of the loss of human life to coronavirus? Oh, more people died of flu each year. Where are those jackasses now? 409,000 Americans died in 2019 of strokes, Alzheimer's, diabetes, the flu, and pneumonia combined. We're almost at that just from coronavirus. And the virus isn't finished with the US by any means, even with the arrival of the vaccines that could finally vanquish the outbreak. A widely cited model by the University of Washington projects the death toll will reach nearly 567,000 by May 1st. Nearly 567,000 could be dead by May 1st. Keep in mind, with the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, that killed 675,000 Americans. We're at 400,000 right now, could be at 567,000 by May. The Spanish flu pandemic killed 50 million people to 100 million people worldwide. 675,000 were killed in the US. While the Trump administration has been credited with Operation Warp Speed, the crash program to develop and distribute coronavirus vaccines, Trump has repeatedly downplayed the threat, mocked wearing masks, rallied against lockdowns, promoted unproven and unsafe treatments, undercut scientific experts, and expressed scant compassion for the victims. Even his own bout with COVID-19 seemed to leave him unchanged. The White House defended the administration. Quote, we grieve every single life lost to this pandemic, and thanks to the president's leadership, Operation Warp Speed has led to the development of multiple safe and effective vaccines in record time, something many said would never happen, said White House spokesman Judd Deere. He's looking for a job too. The nation reached the 400,000 milestone in just under a year. The first known deaths from the coronavirus in the US were in early February 2020, both of them in Santa Clara County, California. It took 4 months to reach 100,000 deaths. It took 4 months to reach the first 100,000 deaths from coronavirus. It took just over 1 month to go from 300,000 deaths to 400,000 deaths. Now we're having close to, on average, about somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 deaths a day. And okay. So we'll talk about this some more on today's show. Looking at, we'll talk about this some more on Wednesday's show. The nation has, 400,000. And we're at, all right, so Okay, we'll talk some more about this on Wednesday's show. Very quickly, we'll get to part of this interview from the Mike Douglas show, and we'll deal with this some more on tomorrow night's show. So this is from either 67 or 68. Dr. King on the Mike Douglas show. Let me see if I can find a I think this was 67. And Tony Martin is a guest on the show also.
Tony, our next guest is the winner of the Nobel Prize for Peace.
So this is from November 2nd, 1967. November 2nd, 1967.
Perhaps the foremost spokesman for the nonviolent faction in the American Negro civil rights movement. His recent speeches and sermons urging Negroes not to fight in Vietnam have initiated a verbal argument among prominent Negroes that threatens to split the civil rights movement wide open. Would you please welcome a very outstanding and controversial gentleman, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I said to Dr. King, I want to put you right in the middle. I wasn't thinking. You've been quite often, haven't you?
That's very right.
Dr. King, why did you decide to urge Negroes not to fight in Vietnam?
Well, I think my view has been a little distorted at that point. I haven't only urged Negroes not to fight. I feel that the war is so unjust, so abominable, so futile and bloody and costly that nobody should be fighting there. I haven't limited my concern to just the American Negro, although I know we are dying in disproportionate numbers there. And we are on the losing end, both there and at home, because as long as the war in Vietnam continues, social problems will inevitably suffer here at home.
Well, don't you think that your remarks have created doubts about the Negro's loyalty to his country?
Well, some people may feel that. I don't think our loyalty to the country should be measured by our ability to kill. I think our loyalties to the country should be measured by our ability to lead the nation to higher heights of democracy and to the great dream of justice and humanity.
You honestly feel, Dr. King, that the war in Vietnam could be stopped now without harm to this country?
Well, there are two ways to deal with it. One is a unilateral withdrawal. I don't oppose that because I feel that this is a possibility. After all, France withdrew unilaterally from Algeria, withdrew without a military victory. Mm-hmm. And this did not lessen France's prestige or influence in the world. If anything, it increased its prestige in the world.
France is not the power that this country is.
Well, I think that's an even greater reason why we should restrain our power. There's always the danger that any nation will abuse its power. And I think our power must be much more than military power. We don't need to prove to the world or anybody our military power. I think we've got to prove our moral power.
Do you feel that this nation has abused, as you say, their power?
Oh, I certainly do in the war in Vietnam. I have no doubt about that. I'm not saying that it was done with evil motives in mind. I think we made a huge miscalculation. And when you make a mistake, you ought to confess it. One of the great things about President Kennedy was that he said to the world, to his closest advisors, that he made a mistake in the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba. And he said, I'm not of experts. And I think the time has come now for our leaders to say that we've made a grave mistake in Vietnam, and we ought to take the initiative in bringing an end to this conflict, if not through a unilateral withdrawal, at least through a negotiated settlement. And I think there are things that we can do to create the atmosphere for negotiation.
You know, Dr. King, my first question, when you said was, you didn't say it was inaccurate, but you said it was a misunderstanding that you didn't advise just Negroes not to fight in Vietnam. But I think it was interpreted that way. Now, how about the heroic Negroes already in Vietnam? Don't your remarks belittle their accomplishments?
Oh, not at all. I have nothing but admiration for the bravery of those who are engaged in the kind of sacrificial and suffering situation that they are in. I'm not dealing with their particular situation in terms of fighting. I'm trying to do something, trying to lead us somewhere that will bring an end to what I see as a terrible and a very tragic war, which is damaging the image of our nation here and abroad.
Doctor, may I ask you a question?
Yes.
Don't you feel that perhaps the parents of the boys who are now currently in the operation in Vietnam might not be in amity with your civil rights movement now because of your...
I doubt that. I doubt that very seriously. I can't overestimate the amount of discontent in the Negro community over the war in Vietnam. I haven't seen any loss of support in the Negro community.
I don't mean just in the Negro community. I mean, there are many of the Caucasians who are with your civil rights movement as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if you're not disingratiating yourself, how you feel about those who have their sons in Vietnam now.
Well, there again, I think two things are important here. First, I think that the things that I'm saying and the things that I'm trying to do, and all of the people in the peace movement are trying to do, are really geared toward bringing the boys back home. In other words, we are trying to prove to be their best friends by doing something to bring about the climate that will bring an end to this war. Secondly, anyone who is committed to civil rights would not withdraw that commitment as a result of someone in the civil rights movement taking a stand against the war in Vietnam. And if they do, then they were not with it in the beginning. You stand up for what is just because it is just and right. I think it was T.S. Eliot who said, there's no greater heresy than to do the right thing for the wrong reason.
That's right.
And a lot of people do the right thing for the wrong reason. And I submit that anyone who would stop supporting civil rights because of a stand against the war on the part of some leaders ended up doing the right thing for the wrong reason. They were never truly committed to civil rights in the beginning.
All right. So we'll share some more of that interview on our show tomorrow. All right, we got to get out of here. Also, in some of these pardons, Donald Trump has issued 143 pardons or commuted sentences. Washington Post reports. I was looking at this here. He pardoned Steve Bannon. Trump grants clemency to 143 people in a late night pardon blast. Steve Bannon, rapper Lil Wayne for his gun charges. Former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick, who has been serving a 28-year prison sentence on corruption charges. Trump also granted clemency to Casey Ehrlicher, brother of former NFL star Brian Ehrlicher, who pleaded not guilty in March to charges that he helped run an illegal offshore gambling ring. But when we look at Steve Bannon, now it's interesting with Steve Bannon because Bannon was accused of it was dealing with fundraising charges. Bannon was accused, this was regarding this fund surrounding Build the Wall. Let me see if I go. Okay, so where is it? Bannon and 3 others have been charged by federal prosecutors in Manhattan with making fraudulent representations as they solicited donations for a fundraising campaign called We Build the Wall. We Build the Wall. Despite making claims that they would take no compensation as part of the campaign, prosecutors alleged in a 23-page indictment that Bannon received more than $1 million through a nonprofit entity he controlled and sent hundreds of thousands of dollars to another organizer, Air Force veteran Brian Kolfage, Kolfage, Kolfage. The campaign was supported by several of Trump's allies, and it raised more than $25 million, prosecutors said. During his run for the presidency, Trump had repeatedly promised to build a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border and claimed it would be funded by Mexico, which it was not. It's being funded by taxpayers, and the majority of the wall that's been built, except for about 9 miles, is just replacing the barriers that were already there. After his election, he sparred with Congress over whether U.S. taxpayers should fund the effort, as he failed to get Mexico to agree to provide funds. Trump did not pardon Kolfage, Brian Kolfage, and the others charged alongside Bannon. He did not give pardons to them, according to the White House list. Bannon had pleaded not guilty in the case and was out on bond awaiting trial. Okay. All right. All right. Look, we have to get out of here. If you like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace.